Welcome to another CBJ podcast. I'm your host, Scott Rennak, and I'm excited today to sit down with Brett Jessen, the head of climbing environments for Bouldering Project, which means he builds their gyms, which is pretty cool and unique because they're the only major chain in America, at least, that builds their own gyms. They are DIY walls. Of course, after you've built so many as they have, it's not quite the same DIY as you might have on your first gym, but it is going to be interesting. We're going to learn a little bit about Brett, how he got into the industry, what keeps him here, and what it's like to build some, new gyms. And maybe at the end, we'll even talk a little bit about where the community's going. So we hope you enjoy the podcast. But before we get started, I need to take a minute and recognize our sponsors, because without those sponsors, we wouldn't be able to have these podcasts. Rooney. Out of Norway, Rooney makes chalk and apparel for climbers, inspired by YouTuber Magnus Mitbo. Learn more at rungne.com. Approach. Founded by a multi-gym owner, Approach develops software to manage any climbing facility. Learn more at approach.app. Onsite. Out of Montreal, Onsite builds climbing walls for schools, rec centers, private homes, and full commercial climbing gyms. Learn more at theonsite.com. Essential. Distributors of holds, macros, and volumes. Essential also installs custom walls and flooring. Learn more at essentialclimbing.com. Flashed. Designing landing surfaces for both climbing gyms and boulderers, Flashed is the official padding partner of USA Climbing. Learn more at flashed.com. Hello, welcome to CBJ Podcasts again. This is Scott Rennak, your host, and I'm excited to be sitting here today with Brett Jessen, head of climbing environments at Bouldering Project. When I first heard that title, I was like, what does that even mean? And apparently he builds all the gyms. So if you've seen all of the incredible new facilities that they've been putting together in the last couple of years, this is the man behind the scenes for that. And so, welcome to the show, Brett.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah. I mean, to get started, I did a little bit of research on you before this, and oh my gosh, you've done like all of the things in climbing. You've been a routesetter, you've been a wall builder, you were involved in sales, you've been a consultant, and now you're in this what a lot of people would think is a pretty cool role in our industry. Could you walk us through a little bit of your career? Like how did you get to this seat that you have now, this position you have now, and like where did you get started? Why did it get going for you?
It was a 30-year journey. I started climbing in 1995 at a local gym in Spokane, Washington. By 96, I was a full-time route setter and I coached a climbing team for several years. And I was just super motivated to become a climber in the 90s in, Lycra and tank tops and all that. And it was a pretty epic time. And climbing was so new, and especially indoor climbing gyms, that, I would be out bolting routes and spending my weekends climbing outdoors. And I just got so into the indoor climbing environment during that time and really kind of just saw that there was a future for bringing people into such an amazing sport. And it was pretty underground at the time, for sure. And but it just started to blow up and just continue growing. So, yeah. Do you want the full history? Or?
So like early on, you started as a climber and then you became a coach and a route setter. Like how long was that lag before you started and you got involved in the industry?
Oh my gosh. I would say there was a year of climbing outdoors, and then they built the first indoor rock climbing gym in Spokane, Washington. So I was out bolting routes, red pointing, 11s and 12s at the time. It was pretty fresh in the area. My mentor, Marty Bland, who's bolted over like 400 sport climbs in Eastern Washington, really got me into the outdoor environment. And there was legitimately maybe 4 of us who were trying to bolt routes. And it was so new and fresh to be developing. I mean, other places like American Fork existed already, Smith Rocks and all those areas, but we didn't really have much in the Northwest during that time. So I don't know. I was a barista in the morning. I would go set routes and then I'd train at night. And this happened for years. So yeah.
Yeah. And then what made the switch? Because there's when I look at your history, there's like you just described the facility level work, but you've done a lot of broader work. It sounds like really for cross facilities for brands, some work across the country. What instigated that switch from being route setter and coach to gym builder and consultant and the
Well,
other
I moved
roles?
to Bozeman, Montana, and ended up, I left to Eastern Washington. I traveled the country and followed a friend over to Bozeman, and that scene was pretty new. And I started bolting routes over there and I worked at a small climbing gym, and I just couldn't afford to travel as much as I wanted. So I got into construction and started building homes in Big Sky, Montana, which was pretty wild. So I'd work 6 months on and then I'd take 6 months off and I'd live out of my Subaru. It was like I had a 1983 Subaru and then I upgraded to a 91. And we're talking like Virgin River Gorge, Oliver Red Rocks. I'd flown into Waco several times when I was younger too. I'm jumping around because all of it just kind of blends in at times. But I remember jumping on a plane and taking a taxi out to Waco Tanks. They didn't even have pads back then, and getting dropped off and just like running around and no pads. That was back when like Frederick Nicole and Todd Skinner and everybody was out there, and Scott Milton and, like Sharma was there when he was 15. So you got to see like this progression. And I wanted so bad to be able to be that strong, but it was just like, I was so focused on grades at the time, like climbing 12s, 13s, V8s, V9s back then. And then you just kind of hit that plateau. And then I would burn out after 6 months, go back to work. And then I did that for about 10 years. And yeah.
Is that what building homes in Big Sky, by the way, like that trajectory? I've heard so many climbers that like, hey, can I find the part time? What job can I work 3 to 6 months a year so I can have this lifestyle that I want? Or, and I love that living I spent some time in a van too. So building kind of high end homes. And then is that the thing that you did right before you moved to building gyms? So you took that experience and applied it to wall building?
No, not necessarily. So then one day in VRG, I was working on this route that Mike Call had bolted and Frederick Nicole just put up. And I put so much work into this because I really wanted to hit that grade of like 13D. It's called Hell Comes to Frogtown. And I pretty much burnt myself out, made it like past the hard crux and punted, and I blew my shoulder out. And I remember sitting at the base and I'm like, I'm moving back to Spokane. I'm going to meet my wife and I'm going to get married and I'm going to have kids. And I made the joke and drove off. And then sure enough, 2 years later, I was married, living in Spokane again. And I have 2 kids, but we ended up separating later on, which is not a bad thing. I mean, I still get to see the kids and I only live like 20 minutes from them. So, but that part, I ended up becoming a GC in Spokane. And then the market crashed and I just missed climbing so much that I was like, I need to get back in this industry. So I ended up working for mountaingear.com. You remember them? They used to produce the catalogs.
Oh yeah.
I used to write copy for them. I was a merchandiser, a climbing buyer for them. And that's when I got involved with meeting all the reps, getting to know, then I started like climbing again and getting sponsorships and really just dove in head first again because it's just always going to be there. And I just loved it. And then when I was getting divorced, I got a call from my friend who was the main builder for Vertical Solutions. And that's where it all starts. And I flew to Chicago and lived there for 8 months and built a BKB Chicago for Dustin and John Stack. Sorry, Adam's the brother. John Stack and Derek Foote, who's a good friend of mine. And I just lived on the road for VS and ended up building several gyms for them all over New York, Chicago. And the Front OG was a big project I worked on. And then an old friend of mine, Mike Bacchino, was like, why don't you come set for me again? Because I was like setting off and on occasionally. And then I became his assistant head setter for the Front and took a break from building gyms. Yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I couldn't find that former pro athlete stuff in the internet.
Yeah.
You know, you and I think we're about the same age, and you know, all the stuff we did back in the 90s, it's invisible these days. So that's incredible. I had really no idea that you were as connected as deeply to the sport as you are. I knew you had a lot of history, but you know, I mean, you probably, I think route setting is one of the core, like not just you know, the product on the wall, but I think they're kind of almost the culture holders. Certainly in the past they were. And it's debatable what the role was these days. But you were that.
Yeah, I quit setting when I was 44. What was that? Almost 46, 5 years ago. I was working with Joel Zer, Kiram, and Shannon at Momentum. I got hired there because I took a break from building again and became a setter. So, and that was like being with that crew at that time and at that age. I wasn't drinking alcohol. I wasn't eating gluten. I was training hardcore. I was probably in the best shape of my life. I mean, I climbed V10 and 13 plus and I just like saw the change, you know. It'd been like 3 or 4 years since I set, and the amount of the competition style bouldering, and I couldn't throw my body the way that I needed to. Old school power problems you can get all day long, but it was just this changing and adapting, and I think it's amazing where it's gone, but you really have to like it's no longer like in the past, I would set 3 or 4 days and then I'd spend the weekends climbing outdoors. And then my trips were like going climbing. You can't with as physical as it is these days. I mean, people still do it. Don't get me wrong. And I do believe that, you know, you got to build that quiver of movement. Climbing outside is what like really locks in different types of movement. And it's hard to do these days, especially with as intense and hard as the boulder problems can be. You know, you're forerunning for hours, you're setting and you're forerunning on super hard stuff for hours and hours. And, you know, props to all the setters these days. It's pretty impressive to watch a lot of these. You know, I watch Morgan when I go into Poplar, Morgan Sharp. I work with Nick Klubja very closely on the transitions from when I build the gyms to the setting team. And they're still holding on strong.
Yeah, that's a whole. We have actually a whole series, a monthly conversation about route setting, and more than half of it ends up being about like longevity and how to keep doing it for a long time, both from a physical perspective and from a career perspective. So is that what got you into? So you had the building experience. You've been a lifelong climber. Is that the segue to building gyms for BP?
There's more.
Oh,
I went to, so I met Boone Speed and Mike Call at Momentum and Bailey Speed, and they started Grasshopper, the adjustable boards. And they hired me as one of their salespeople. So I got to work very closely with them in the beginning of Grasshopper, which was amazing. Like they're all of them were such amazing characters, so much history in the outdoor industry still. Like Mike Call's out there shooting video all the time. He's still deep in it. And then that's where I met Andy Wyatt when I was working for Grasshopper. and Andy Wyatt is the former owner of Bouldering Project. And I ran into him at Leavenworth because I used to try to take time to climb there every year. And he's like, "Hey, we're building this new gym in Salt Lake." And I was like, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Do you want to come work for us?" And I got on a call with Dylan Johnson, who still consults, and he's a part of the development team that I'm on. And I was hired to do Salt Lake. And they were building Westgate. This is right after COVID, too. So, and Westgate in Austin, they were just about to kick off that gym. I was told to go down there for a couple days to check it out. And I was there for 4.5 months. I was supposed to be there for 3 days. And I just got into it, like project managing. I've always been a builder, welder. I can pretty much read a set of plans, work with engineers, and we can talk about that once we get into the building part of it. But yeah, I just took off. And then I've been very fortunate to be a part of the growth with Bouldering Project.
So I saw something, a news piece with you in it that said back in about a year ago, you had built 15 gyms up until then. What's your count now? How many gyms have you built up until this moment?
Oh, I would say that was probably 16. So it's been a lot of like, when I say gyms, essentially it can be massive additions. I've been a part of like 9 full build outs in my life. So, and then we're talking like training center additions, like adding more bouldering terrain, essentially all just like, I helped Jeff Ho and Spire Climbing Center in Bozeman do his original expansion, and then he expanded even more. So it's just, I mean,
wow. And I think sitting here, it's December 2025. You just came off finishing St. Paul, the new gym.
Oh yeah, so proud of that gym. I hope everybody can get a chance to see what we actually do. So my wife, Danica Patton Jessen, also works with me. We live together and travel together, and she is the project manager of interiors. So a lot of the work that went into that, like all the FF&E, the furniture and fixtures, was her design. All the, she works with the marketing team for the mural. So we're kind of like, we got almost full reign on the St. Paul project to build it out. We have a whole development team, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes, but we're very, very proud, especially in the last 4 years of working with BP, of St. Paul. It's definitely one of my favorites so far.
Well, inevitably in any career, you hopefully you just keep improving, right? So whatever the next gym is going to hopefully even let it all come together even on a higher level. But this being the most recent one, just kind of, would you walk me through like what was that whole experience like? You've been with the business for a number of years. Like sounds like Salt Lake, you kind of came in and they already had the lease and you came in late in the game. St. Paul, you've probably been at the table from day one. So what did day one look like for the guy that's building the gyms, focusing on the facilities, focusing on the infrastructure, but like, were you there before the lease? Or I don't know even if it's a lease or a purchase, but were you there before the commitment to the property? Were you part of that conversation, or how did that whole flow go?
So the way the development growth team works is we have Will Hetzler, who's my direct report, amazing human being. He really gives us a lot of free reign, but also he essentially runs the development growth team. And the development and growth team consists of Will Hetzler, who's the chief growth officer, Max Zalatukin, who supports, I don't know if you've heard that name. He's an amazing climber. And we work with them. They're the ones that actually like find and go look at all the buildings. And then we start the design process with the team. Miranda Gurga, who is our architect. Hopefully I said her last name right. But, and Dylan Johnson, architects and designers, they start producing schematics. So when we look at a building, we start developing like layouts, like a 2D layout of what it should, where the yoga, the fitness, the training center. And that's what Miranda and Dylan do. And then we go through several projects. Like, it's not like we see St. Paul and then we send. It's like long conversations, and then we do figure pro formas out. We make sure it's right for the community, talk to the local gyms, like like MVP. We talk to, Sean and Katie, who are based out of there. And we just start to really dive into it. And I usually get to check out the buildings if they're close to the lease. There's a few buildings we have in mind, but it has to, like, I can't put that much energy into that. So that's when, like, I have to focus. If we're in a project, we're working on dozens of other projects, hopefully. And then once Will and, the team, as in the board, decide to sign a lease and we get to move forward, we've already had, hours and hours and hours, Danica and myself, into estimating. We do all the estimating for our scope of work, and we manage all the budgets once we get approved. So all the pre-construction work is like, it's heavy, until we get to the point of where we mobilize.
I imagine you've had a couple false starts where you get all that ready and then at least falls through. That's one of the stories of climbing gyms. Like, we didn't get the property we wanted, and so I'm sure a couple times you've gotten to near the finish line, you throw it out, and start over.
Would not want to be a part of lease negotiation. Like, props to Max and Will for dealing with all that. It's a lot, and they're really good at it. So.
I heard, I saw some references before to like skateboarding, pro skateboarding, or pro BMX guys that have been part of, or people that have been part of the process in the past. Was that like a phase that you've kind of ingested, or do you bring that kind of like urban sports energy to all of the projects, or is it kind of project by project?
They still exist. Yeah. They're essentially master carpenters so it all started in the original days of when Bouldering Project began. They would hire local climbers or local people to build the gym from start to finish. So you'd have like Vincent LaBelle, who's a friend of mine and who pretty much started the Bouldering Project construction back in the day. He would just show up with power tools and hire kids and train them to build these walls, and everything would be custom fabricated on site. All the sheets of wood were like 4x8 pieces of plywood that they drill out. And now it's just to scale. I had to really figure out how to find these teams. And so in Salt Lake, we used the skate park builders that built Woodward Skate Park. And watching them manipulate 2x6s and plywood, because we still maintain curves in our walls. A lot of people don't. So we like the seamless, slight curved. It just gives a really beautiful aesthetic. And it's an argument with setters, obviously. So we're reducing them. We're still going to keep them. Because volumes have gotten so big these days that you need to make sure your curves are slight. But I had to build this team that we still hire local for our epoxy work, but Alan, Gene, and Craig, who are my main builders, they show up on every job, and their main goal is to, like, have you seen our rib structure that we've built into that? So I'm going to start with how we actually do that. So we've been developing a system for the last 3.5 years. That's essentially, I take the model, the climbing train model. You look like you have a question.
I just wanted to inject quick our listeners so they understand one of the things that really sets Bouldering Project aside from all of the other gyms is that you build your own gyms. Mm-hmm. all of
Yep.
the other gyms hire established wall builders that also work for other chains and other brands and stuff. So this whole, I don't expect you to give away the special sauce here to our listeners, but it really is important to understand that like you're a very unique business in this space. And so yeah, I've seen some of the photos. I love your woodwork. I love that you don't rely on steel for a lot of that. We could go into that. Maybe you want to go into that, but I just wanted to have that aside before you get into the details. Make sure our listeners understand.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're
But
all
please.
in-house from start to finish. I mean, obviously we have to source fabricators for our infrastructure, and our CNC work for all of our wood ribs and our sheeting. So you tell me what direction you want to go. I can kind of explain of when we sign a lease into the climbing terrain design, and then just kind of like go into how we execute these builds, if that sounds interesting.
That sounds interesting. I think, the people that are listening to this and are curious, probably are dreaming of their own gym, and whether they're going to DIY it or they're going to hire a builder and they kind of oversee and hire an architect. And, there's a lot of people you could hire to build it for you. You guys have almost all that in house, but, I would say the more you can talk about that in a framework that someone, can learn from you, that whole process is interesting.
Oh, absolutely. So we'll start from the beginning. Well, after you sign a lease and all of a sudden you get the building, climbing terrain is designed, and we have a group, some of the names that work for Bouldering Project. So Miranda and Dylan will finish. Miranda does most of the climbing terrain design these days. And then we have a group that gets together, and it's Kevin Jorgensen, Nick Klebsha, Max Salatukin, Will's a part of it, Dylan's a part of it, obviously, and myself. But they focus, Nick, Max, and Kevin really focus on the wall designs. Once Miranda creates, and Miranda's always amazing at creating the initial design, and then we just go through and tweak it, and having their opinion matters so much to get to where we're at. And you can see that in St. Paul. And then once that gets the stamp of approval, then they hand that to me, and then it's all mine to go to the engineers, to go to the fabricators, and build out the build schedule, hire the team, mobilize the team. So it's a pretty cool process, and it's all done in-house with BP, which it doesn't happen very often. It's not an easy thing to do for a company.
Plenty of, especially smaller new gyms, try to do that on their own, but there's nobody that's doing it at scale like you do. What is that? What did that process take for St. Paul? How big is St. Paul? I should have that stat in front of you. I think you told me 11,000 square feet of climbing terrain and a 40,000 square foot box. Is that about right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
yeah, there's 11,300. 10 of it's adult, and then we tend to do our kids terrain, which has a separate kids room, separate bathroom in there, so that we can really focus on programming for birthday parties and kids groups and teams and stuff.
So you got the lease signed, and that's go. Let's get open as fast as we can. Mm-hmm. Brett, move fast, right? Get these people in there.
Yeah, this is the fastest gym we've ever built. I mean, typically they're eight months, and this was 4.5 from mobilizing to, and we're talking 11,000 square feet of climbing terrain from start to finish, which is huge, especially how custom all of our walls are. And, but yeah, I think, go ahead.
Oh yeah. And you do your own flooring too. So it's it's just soup to nuts, A to Z, full in-house.
Yeah.
And so flooring. Then you finish that, and I'm sure there's another project that you're allowed to talk about or not. But then I imagine you go back to some of the other gyms, because as anybody that runs gyms knows, we have to, especially flooring needs to get refurbished, whatever, 5, 10 years, probably. Walls need that too. You need new walls. I guess you got some old gyms that were like the pre-training board era. So I'm sure you were going around to some of the older gyms and retrofitting. How much of that is part of your job?
Well, man, in the last 4.5 years, we've done Tempe, Brooklyn, Salt Lake, Westgate. We completely demoed the old BKB Brooklyn, which I also worked on back in the day a little bit. Rebuilt that. Um, Man, we've had Springdale and Austin, which is an amazing gym. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. It was one of the first two. It might have been the third. But there's like 18,000 square feet of climbing in that gym. And we tore every single sheet and all of the foam out. And this is like a year and a half ago, and completely redid that whole gym. And it looks amazing. It's not an easy feat, especially when you're going to keep it open. Especially the old steel structure that they did with the tech screws. Demo was massive. And yeah, we have to go through and that's one thing I really admire about Bouldering Project is we continue to add training centers. We continue to renovate our gyms, and it's not cheap by any means. So the reinvestment into those gyms is really important as we're building new gyms. And we'll just continue going through some of the older gyms and cleaning them up. And like Poplar got a brand new training center, which was massive when we were building U District. I don't know if you heard about U District, but that was the old Wells Fargo bank that we did with the sauna in the vault.
You kept the vault. I didn't do my research on that well.
You should look. It's just got
you go through a big circle door to get to the sauna. Really?
Yeah, it's a massive like old vault. And there's cold plunges and 2 vaults downstairs. It is, and like when you walk into the sauna, the safety deposit boxes are there, and there's this massive sauna that Danica, my partner, helped design, and I think it just won like one of the best saunas in all of Seattle too. So, which is pretty cool.
Sounds like a fun job.
Yeah. That historic building was intense. We built a majority of the climbing terrain on the second story, and it's an old ballroom floor. So we couldn't use any lifts. We had to reinforce the whole floor. Everything had to get sent through a second story window. It was all built with scaffolding and ladders. Like it was crazy, but it turned out really cool.
So years ago, when I first saw one of the Bouldering Project, a photo of in process of Bouldering Project, I was struck by all wood. And is that the ethos, especially on your bouldering gyms? Are you still all wood? And would you talk just a little bit about wood versus steel as the underlying structure? Like why that decision? Because I know lots of steel is used still. I'm personally a wood guy. I full disclosure, I had a little gym like in the 90s too. And it was like, the guys built it by hand in the evenings over 9 months, and it was all wood. I love wood because it's easy to work with. It's easy to change. It's easy to swap out. But would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So it depends on what type of building it is. So certain types of building, because of the fire rating, you have to like some buildings you have to do like a full steel infrastructure and then sheet it with wood. It depends on how the building was built. There's like type 1 buildings, there's type 2 buildings, type 3. And then the goal is to try to find one that we can do our wood rib system in. Because the reason the wood rib system was created is not only we wanted to maintain the look of a Bouldering Project, the seamless look, but we also needed to speed up our builds. So we take the model, we created a grasshopper script that I've been working with our engineers and some other programmers on, and it will take the model and it will populate all of the ribs and it will populate the sheeting. Everything is pre-cut. Like all those ribs are 4 layers of 3/4 inch plywood. that are CNC. So not only does it populate this program Grasshopper script into the model, it takes it from the model and it splays it out on 4x8 sheets of plywood. And then the CNC operator. So we minimized our drop by like 20%. And now you just get I'm just going to call it a Lego kit. Like the ribs show up. We have base plates we created that are all numbered. Every single sheet has a number on it. So we can just look at a document and know exactly where everything's going to go. And it doesn't always just snap together. Obviously, when you're bending wood the way we do, sometimes you have to figure out ways to manipulate it. But every single angle change is cut into our ribs. So, essentially arêtes, dihedrals, everything, a percentage of them are already built into our rib system. So we just stand these things. We get the infrastructure up, stand up the ribs, put the standoffs on it, and then we put blocking and sheets on it. And it's a kit. It's a kit of parts. It's wild. I think you'd geek out on it. It's pretty cool.
But I'm sure you've been contacted by some aspiring gym owner, like, "Hey, could you guys come build my gym for you?" I mean, they should know better, but
so yeah, we don't build for anybody else. Yeah, it's too.
Yeah,
it would be way too much. Yeah, unless we want to keep it in house, our aesthetic.
It's one of the really unique factors of unique aspects of the gym. And, even back to your design team, I'll just comment, and this is not an advertorial here for Bouldering Project, but man, you guys have really amassed a team of really heavy hitters. I mean, you've been throwing out Nick and Max's name. I'll add, those are level 5 route setters in USA Climbing. Those guys have been around for a minute and know what a good wall is for both comps and commercial setters, commercial uses. So yeah, I've been watching from outside. It's been really wild. And then you guys brought on Kevin and yeah, I know you can't talk about it, but I'm sure people are kind of wondering what's the next acquisition going to be? Where's the next big beautiful St. Paul-like gym going to go? And so it's going to be fun to watch you guys here in the future.
We're looking at several areas. Max and Will are right now, but no, I can't talk about it.
Of course. But maybe what you can't talk about, I'd love to just segue this a little bit. This has been a lot of awesome background about you and the Bouldering Project and some of your processes. Again, our listeners often are people that are planning their first gym, planning their 7th gym, and they come to these podcasts often for some inspiration and advice. And so maybe if I tip into that advice space, and I know you're going to have some limitations on what you could say, but there's still an ethic of DIY. It's a big ethic in our industry. There's a lot of people coming into it, especially with that when they have outside money and private money, that they value hiring a professional, hiring a bona fide supplier. But that's not the whole industry. And especially in the small, there's this whole area of smaller training gyms coming in, and you look at it and you're like, I could build a 16-foot by 12-foot bouldering wall. I could build a 30-foot by 15-foot bouldering wall. I could do this kind of thing. What would you say to that person, either in the advice or just make sure you don't do these things? You're gonna these pitfalls that you've fallen down. If I'm sitting here asking Brett, what would you say to the aspiring DIY gymmer?
I would say that there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I've built so many other gyms for friends that are starting. I've done the do-it-yourself from scratch, where you get the plywood and you get the friends and new napkin sketch out, your angles and whatnot. And I think it's great. Obviously there's, there's a lot of big companies out there that own gyms, and I'm pick the right building. I mean, if it's a local place like a small town that you grew up and you really want to build a climbing gym in it, um, you should go for it. I mean, if you can find the funding, obviously, and if that's how you want to create your brand, I mean, that's what BP was built off of. Never going to, a lot of companies were built off that. Um, and I really think that if there's opportunity for it, these small training centers, especially these, you know, I I mean, if I was to do it, like say I didn't work for BP, I would find a place that, there wasn't a massive competitor involved there that, you could really build your own culture in. Um, I mean, that's how climbing was built. These little spaces, training centers, where you just plastered like a spray wall of holds and everybody, this tight knit community. I mean, that's how I grew up. And um, what, you know, just if it's your dream, you should obviously go for it. Like,
Kind of getting away from the topic I thought we were going to talk about, but do you think there's still plenty of opportunity for that around America when you see it? I mean, you travel a little bit.
yeah, I do. And the last thing I want to do, I mean, is stop anybody from pursuing their dreams, and taking chances are just a part of it. I wouldn't be here if I didn't take 1,000 chances. Like um, and just make sure you understand your market and the people, and that you can afford to do it, because it's not easy. It's a ton of work. Building the gyms is fun. And then you get into operations, which I don't spend much time other than when we hand off the gym. I've been a general manager. I've been a route setter, it's just, um, building the gym's the easy part. Running it's the hardest, I'm sure, like,
You get to the end of the build, and that's just the beginning of the business.
yeah,
that's
yep.
that's where you get started. Back to the building, because that's the real expertise that you bring. And what you're, if you hear one of your buddies reaches out and is like, "Hey, Brad, I'm gonna build my own gym over here." What's like, and if you look over their plans, they're looking over their shoulders, and they have a dinner with you to kind of pick your brain. What are the biggest things that you would make sure that you would see in their plans, and maybe not as much the marketing, more the design and the layout, or lots of people do this thing, and I've found that that's a bad idea, or yeah, the converse, like we found this great way to address this one problem. It could be foot traffic, it could be wall construction, but when it gets to the design and the build, what would you be making sure your buddy got right?
The building obviously is the most important, the guts. Like, there's some buildings people get involved in that are falling apart, and they don't realize the maintenance that the person that's leasing the building needs to maintain with the TI and the fit out of everything, the plumbing. I mean, there needs to be, the one thing is, I think people get very excited about the opportunity, and then they go all in without understanding, how all of that can compile into more money, more time down the road. Um, the guts are the most important part. Like, figuring out that building and the plumbing, the HVAC unit. The last thing you want is to negotiate a lease where you're replacing all the HVAC, 2 years down the road. Is do the research, take the time, have the conversations, and then make sure you really spend a ton of time budgeting, estimating everything down to the screw. Like, and just be prepared, be patient, and really just put the time in, and don't just jump headfirst into it. That's what I would say is probably the best advice I can give, because there's a lot of people that call me And then I ask how much money they have, and they tell me, and I'm like, oh boy, um, you're not going to be able to afford toilets or whatnot. So we might need to get more money. But yeah, I do get those calls. And I think what I just said is probably the most important part. Um, and reaching out.
Forget the walls. Make sure, like, not the climbing walls. Make sure the exterior walls, the
Mm-hmm.
framework, the roof,
Mm-hmm.
the HVAC, the plumbing. Like, make sure that's all. Because you've been in a historical building. Actually, I was on the team at the spot when we went into Denver, and it was a 120-year-old building or something. And yeah, there was like there were
Mm-hmm.
skeletons in those closets when
Oh yeah.
and you just didn't know 100% when you opened the door or you started the lease and you got in there. There was some discovery. So that's
Have
really
you been to the
salient.
Salt Lake Bouldering Project? The one with
Yeah,
the hotels in
yeah,
it and everything?
that's beautiful.
It is, but when I showed up, the walls were falling down. It's an old historic
Oh,
building and they are
ah,
legitimately tilted out, being held up. And there's a lot of seismic, like earthquakes. Obviously, I was there I lived there off and on for 7 years. And so we had to bury 70-foot helical anchors. Like they're like, do you know what a helical anchor? It's a big, like, it looks like a big propeller, but imagine on a rod that's 70 feet deep because in order to like, and then put the rebar around that. So it was buried in the ground 70 feet deep. We put the rebar, pour the concrete, and then we have to build the walls. All the infrastructure had to land perfectly without hitting any of that rebar because of the overturned forces and how the soil and the earthquakes and everything. And I don't really know if we knew that when we were going into that building. It turned out amazing, don't get me wrong, but it was a whole thing. And those are just the things that you don't really understand, especially with seismic. I learned a lot of that from Vertical Solutions and um, certain ways we had to build in Queensboro. It was the Queens BKB was under like a 40-story complex, apartment complex. And we couldn't hit rebar because obviously, it was just like the amount of engineering that went into some of those builds, especially at the front OG. You can get yourself into trouble unless with certain buildings in certain areas, and then it just gets expensive.
so hearing that with my DIY hat on, I was like, I don't know if I want a DIY. But maybe I'll call someone that really knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Hire one of these builders to come in, and at least they've hopefully done
Hmm.
this before.
Well, at least find an engineer, somebody that can help you. The DI, it's still doable, but you just need, especially with cities these days and codes and how stringent they are. With all your fireproofing. And we embed sprinklers into our climbing terrain because some of it's so steep that if it overhangs more than 4 feet, like in St. Paul, we had to embed probably 10 sprinkler heads into the climbing walls, and then the setters have to set around them. The last thing you want to do is hit one of those sprinklers with a screw. Um, so, codes. If you don't pay attention to codes, you'll never get your gym open. So you need to have somebody consult or support you in getting through those steps because it is dealing with the cities, making sure all of your plans, your structural set is stamped, your architectural set has to be stamped, or they'll just come in and you'll never be able to open and you'll just create a bunch of fines. I don't want to scare people away, but it's important for safety and liability that you take the proper steps to get to the end.
Yeah. And even when you do all of that right, there's some surprises along the way, and then just delays. I mean, it's this constant thing where I plan to open the gym in September, and it doesn't open till December or January or February sometimes because there's just all these little hurdles at the end of the game. But I guess that's modern building. It's not the '90s anymore, Brett. We can't just whack this thing up and hope OSHA's not going to watch, and nobody's going to give us a certificate of occupancy. That wasn't.
And the nineties were fun. Early 2000s were pretty fun too, but it's just this sport has grown so much, so fast. Like it's crazy how quick and how popular it's become. Um, which I think is amazing because I can't even imagine not having it in my life and having the opportunity. And, I've tried to get out of it a few times, but I think I'm just too in love with it to leave anytime soon again.
That's one of the questions I like to ask everybody that's been doing this for a long time is like, what keeps you coming back? But I know the answer is you love this stuff, right? I mean, this is like, it sounds like it's in your DNA. I had no idea, and again, that you were a kind of like pro level climber in the back in the day. This is just what you do, right?
Have climbed over 255 12s and 55 13s and tons of boulders. And we got to a point where I still love it. And I don't climb as much as I used to since I left Momentum sitting there. But you got to figure out, it's important to find some sort of legacy to leave behind, as I like to say. And I feel like this is one that I'm better at this than I was as a climber. So it's just I want to keep doing it, and I want to bring these gyms to this. Like, climbing is such an amazing sport that anybody can do, and it doesn't matter your age or your level. The community, especially community, has gotten just like so inclusive and so supportive of everything. And it's pretty cool to see and be a part of. I never thought it would go this far climbing. It's wild.
What do you think we should be doing more of as an industry or even a community, especially as an industry? Like, what conversations do you think we should be having more of now that we're not this thing? We all had the conversations of the 90s and the 2000s, and it's kind of brought us to today. What do you think the conversations are now that we should be having for this future? Because we're going to keep growing. There's going to keep being more climbers.
That's a question that I've been thinking about a lot in the last 10 years, especially going from climbing in Leavenworth, when it first started, to Waco Tanks when I first went to Waco, or Joe's Valley, or even Bishop, or even the sport climbing areas like Rifle and everything. It's the bigger that a community becomes. We have this, like, you go into a climbing area now and it's just people everywhere. There's pads everywhere. And there's always going to be the ethics conversation. Where do they start? And that's what climbing gyms are built for. That's one thing that I really want to see, is that, I mean, there's a lot of people these days that just climb indoors. They don't go outside, but there's still a lot of people, like, no matter how many times somebody posts that it's raining at Joe's, you'll still see people in the parking lot, or, those conversations, is that I think it's important that the gyms facilities are educating the future. And I know, it's a hard thing to have, and there's lines and everything, but there's only going to be more people at the crags or the bouldering areas. And there has to be some sort of like coaching and guiding for the future. And even people that are new, that aren't young, that understand of, like, when you roll up and somebody's working on a boulder, don't chuck all your pads down and, start getting all rowdy and whatnot. Like, have the conversation with the people that are there. Just, like, be polite, be kind, and treat each other with respect. And I think it's going to take a little more work, and we need to figure that one out.
You do think, it sounds like you think, yeah, gyms and the industry have some responsibility in that space.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I did want to mention, I've been thinking about a lot with Bouldering Project is, might be crossing a line here, but BP was bought out a little while ago by some investors. They're all amazing. They've really done everything they can to maintain the brands. And there's not a lot of companies out there that I've seen that are like Bouldering Project that put in. Some people have been known to call Bouldering Project a little bougie, but it's not that we're bougie. It's just we do a lot of work to kind of make the community feel a part of our gyms. And Bouldering Project reinvests into their gyms. I mean, I can't obviously speak to all the other companies out there, but I don't feel like we're going to stop continuing to build these environments that are beautiful for the climbing community. And I mean, companies could bare bones it, and like show up and build some climbing walls and a training center and throw in a front desk. But that's not how we think as a brand. And I think it's important that people do know that we care just as much as what, goes inside and into our build outs, that, to give the community an opportunity to be a part of something. And I wanted to say that before I forgot about it. So.
Well, this has been, before we wrap up, is there anything that you had kind of burning that you wanted to make sure that you shared with our listeners?
Yeah, I want to say thank you to my wife, Danica. We've been living together and traveling. We're on the road for like 3.5 years together for Bouldering Project. And she also works for Bouldering Project. I mentioned that earlier, that, I mean, without the sunshine that she brings, I don't know the intensity that we're just a perfect couple that can get through this. And I really wanted to say that I appreciate everything, all the support that she's done so that I can continue down this road.
You're on a life mission with climbing.
Well, hopefully I'll be climbing again soon. That's the goal, Scott. I want to get back into it. So.
I wish you success in that.
It's only been like a year off, and I act like it's been a century, but
as a lifelong climber, I get it. It's been a light year. I haven't been bouldering for a year, but I've been scrambling, and don't tell me it's not rock climbing. So, it's been really a pleasure to spend this time with you, Brett, hear about your experiences, hear about Bouldering Project, hear about building gyms. Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us, and have a good day, I guess.
Thank you, Scott. It's been great. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Keep on building those sweet gyms.
I will try. Thank you.
Thanks for spending an hour with me and Brett as we riffed on the climbing industry and his experience. And I hope it was inspiring and you learned something. Make sure you follow us on whatever channel that you're on. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Spotify, and YouTube. Look us up, Climbing Business Journal, and the .com will get you to all of our content. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.